Moves this week, starting with wide receiver DJ Moore.
Sent him to the Buffalo Bills yesterday, Laura, in return for a second-round draft pick shipped off DJ Moore and a fifth-round pick. The Bears felt like they could make that move with Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet. They felt like Caleb Williams had the weapons he needed, and Buffalo really wanted DJ Moore. The two sides get the deal done. Then last night, the Chicago Bears cleared out $15 million of cap space by moving on from Tremaine Edmonds. It's a big move for a productive linebacker who has 900 tackles on his NFL resume. He now will become a free agent, leaving Chicago. The Bears will have a need at the linebacker position, but they felt like with the savings of $15 million, the move made sense at this point in time.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And you talk about some of that money that they freed up. Here's exactly how much more money Chicago has to spend. Between Edmonds' release, the DJ Moore trade, Drew Dahlman's retirement, you're looking at about $44 million in additional cap space ahead of free agency next week. So, Kevin, you like all the moves that the Bears have been making along those lines. What else should they be doing?
Yeah, Drew Dahlman's retirement is a big hit, okay?
Yeah.
But as far as what Ryan Poles can control, it's A++ that last week. To take advantage of a desperate team in Buffalo and get that kind of return for DJ Moore is really cool. And now they've got a lot of money to play with. Obviously, they're going to need pass rush. I want to see a big swing with the assets that they have with the cap space. Maybe you're in the Max Crosby sweepstakes now. Maybe you're in Trey Hendrickson territory because you've got that kind of money. So I think that you're talking about Ben Johnson, year 2, Caleb Williams, year 3. They're going to have the roster ready to compete for an NFC championship because of what Ryan Poles is doing this week.
Listen, Kevin and I are kind of sharing a brain on the show today.
There we
go. I mean, the trade makes a ton of sense. I mean, look, when you look at DJ Moore, he basically, was, I think staring at a diminishing role, in Chicago when you look at the young receivers that they have, and maybe throw in Colston Loveland, the pass catchers, I guess you could say, that they have in Chicago, that, they really didn't need him. They had younger, more productive, less expensive options. And so to trade him and get a second-round pick for him is pretty good because you got Rome Odunze, you got Luther Burden, you got Loveland. And so you have all that. Now, I do think the investment turns to the defensive side of the ball. So certainly, like everybody else in the NFL, we're going to be linked to Max Crosby. But Hendrickson, also another guy that I think that when you talk about the impact that he could have, other than last year where he was kind of banged up and had a bad year, look at like the previous 7 years. Like he has been as good as any edge player the NFL has seen over that stretch. And, you might be able to get him at a much reduced rate because of his age and the year he's coming off of. So I think Chicago finds himself in a pretty good situation.
Yeah, Jeremy, with all that created cap space, is there a big splash? You're hearing some names thrown around, Crosby, obviously, Trey Hendrickson. The Bears, are they preparing to make one of these big splash type deals?
They're preparing to make a splash, but it might be more of like a toddler splash, like a relatively small splash. They'll look into a big splash. I do believe they've kicked the tires on the Max Crosby situation, but that might be a little bit rich for them. They'll get help on the defensive line at some point, whether it's via trade or free agency. Look, Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, has familiarity with Trey Hendrickson from his New Orleans days, and Alex Anzalone, the linebacker who was in Detroit, so they could add to their front seven there. They need a cornerback. They need to try to re-sign Kevin Byard. I do believe there's a chance that that happens. So they could spread the wealth a little bit. In the center, they're going to get a center at some point as well, either in the draft or free agency. So it's going to be a mix of a lot of things.
You mentioned the need for pass rush. Last year, they were historically good at creating turnovers without pressure. If they get the pressure, that's when you're talking about conference championship type stuff.
Yeah, some of the time just taking the ball away comes down to luck. You have to do
and
something.
Catching the ball.
Exactly.
Catching the ball.
We did that a few times in a good way. All right, Adam, another star player whose name has been tossed into trade talks is wide receiver A.J. Brown. You brought this up earlier in our show. What's the latest on his status in Philly?
Listen, Laura, there's a lot of talk right now about A.J. Brown and Max Crosby, and I think the two star players are in similar situations. Two teams that would rather not move them, two teams that would rather hold on to them, but two teams that are getting calls and offers from other teams. It has felt for a while like Philadelphia wouldn't move off A.J. Brown. Now it just feels like those trade wins don't quiet down any. And if anything, it almost feels like the chatter across the league has gained some speed and picked up some. So if Philadelphia were going to make a move, it would want to do it, you would think, before the tampering period began, so they would be able to go after certain replacements and have the draft capital that they know they would have in any A.J. Brown particular trade. I think when you look at the landscape of teams that are out there, Buffalo would have figured for A.J. Brown, Buffalo's out. It got DJ Moore. New England still has not landed a big-name wide receiver. Most people expect that they'll land one of those, certainly having moved off of Stephon Diggs this past week. I still think New England is in play there and would be a logical destination. And obviously there are a lot of teams out there that would love to have A.J. Brown, and it just feels like that talk hasn't quieted down any and is not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, Adam, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but earlier in the show you said the talk's heating up around A.J. Brown. So continuing to keep an eye on that here over the next couple days and into Monday. We'll have you covered for all of it right here on ESPN. You heard some of the names there, or at least one team mentioned, Tim, that the A.J. Brown trade could involve would be the Patriots, which is fascinating to think about that team, Drake May, having a target like that. Is this something the Eagles should be doing, though, trading away A.J. Brown?
There's obviously something going on that they feel like they should, because you know, when you look at the situation, it's not talent based. It's probably more personality, culture, environment, you know, based in terms of his behavior. I don't want to characterize his behavior as something, you know, that is, you know, wildly detrimental, but I think that it's at least been a distraction, and it's at least been something that's had to be managed. And we see this from time to time throughout the league, where there'll be an incredibly talented player playing at a high level, but because of the maintenance that they require, the team is just like, look, we'd rather actually just move on. And so it just feels like, to Adam's point about it, you know, this not quieting down, because I think it's something that Philly is actually, you know, really up for. And so because of that, yeah, I think New England would be an insane, you know, match. I think they're willing to pay the price. You guys played the sound of Mike Vrabel talking about, hey, listen, it costs what it costs to go get a great player. And then I think that, you know, the personality of Vrabel, the personality of A.J. Brown, that I think can be, you know, satisfied in terms of Vrabel's leadership. And then it's a need for New England. They need a true number one. Their current starting wide receivers, all three of them, are each averaging less than 3 touchdown receptions a year. They desperately need a true number one.
Tim said it has to be some sort of distraction in order for Philadelphia to move off of such a talented player. A top 3 outside receiver in this league still, even after a down year. But I'd have to be pretty darn distracted to take the 4th biggest dead cap charge in history to not have A.J. Brown on my team in a year where you're trying to win the Super Bowl. We're talking about a guy who was still 10th in the league in target share again last year, even though he's complaining about not getting the ball. I just think the way he creates space over the middle of the field for Devontae Smith, there's so much that he does, whether he's catching the ball or not, that stresses a defense. I'd want him on my team. Yes, a team like Buffalo, if they could trade right now for a time machine, would be a great option. They're not going to be a fit. So where is he going to go that's going to be a better situation? I guess maybe New England if they want to give up those assets. But I generally, if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm going to try to find a way to keep him. He is so good, and you can't get equal value for a guy like that.
It feels like he wants to get out too, though. I mean, you can't look at what happened last year and say, oh, this guy's just happy as a clam there. I mean, Jeremy, that part of it, I get it. An asset like that, you try to hold on to him if you can, but he doesn't want to be there. Right.
Well, Kevin, you mentioned the salary cap issue with trading A.J. Brown. That is a factor because the Eagles, I'm told, want so much in a potential trade. I talked to one team that asked about this, and they said they want a first-round pick and even a second-round pick. Like, we're talking a lot of draft capital for a receiver who's close to 30 years old. Now, maybe they'll soften on that as talks go, but this is sort of a waiting game because teams aren't willing to give up quite that for A.J. Brown, but they still want him, but the Eagles aren't shutting the door completely. So like Adam said, this is not dissipating anytime soon. It was this way at the Combine last week. It seems to have picked up some steam, but if the Eagles are going to not only have a great player, but they're going to have to take a huge dead cap hit on their books, they need draft return for it.
Adam, how about that price that Jeremy's talking about?
Yeah, and that's the delay. There was one team that called the Eagles last weekend, and they said, hey, we'd like to trade for A.J. Brown. What would be the price? And it was at least a 1 and a 2, maybe more. Yeah. And that team said, wow, thank you very much. No, thank you. And the team obviously made a decision to move on. And I think that that's the case with A.J. Brown and with Max Crosby. Yeah. The Eagles are determined to get their price. The Raiders are determined to get their price.
Yep.
And neither team, the Eagles nor the Raiders, has been willing to budge until they get close to what they want. Now, as the new league year creeps closer and as we get to the start of the next week, it's always possible that the Eagles and the Raiders could reduce their asking price. But it doesn't sound like that's happened at all to date. And it doesn't sound like it may happen today or tomorrow, and we'll see what transpires over the weekend. Both teams are asking a lot. Both teams have been unwilling to move the players unless they get a lot. But both teams are listening to calls and offers.
Somebody's going to have to get real desperate here over the next couple of days. Could happen, okay? Desperation comes out. You never know. Coming up, the Ravens have